In this lesson, we'll take the lightning bolt that we created in our previous lessons, and we'll link this to the pod engines and then get it set up for rendering. Alright, so the first thing we can do is to take these two different ends of the pod, or these two different ends of the lightning bolt, I should say, and then start to link these to the engines themselves. So what I want to do is select the engine, and just so I can make sure I am actually grabbing the right areas, I'm going to press the F4 key on my keyboard to grab the wireframe, or to be able to see the wireframe. So what I want to do is grab this little compartment right here on the side of the engine. So as you can see, when I select my geometry, it's part of a group. So with this selected, let's go to Group and then open up this group. Alright, and now I should be able to access this little component that I want to be able to get to. So I'm just going to press the Z key on my keyboard to zoom in on that. And I'll play through my timeline to a point at which this lines up pretty closely to this little helper object here, and it looks like that's pretty close. We'll get that moved into position. So now I can take this helper object with that selected. Let's go to the link and click and drag that onto this little component. And now with that linked, you can see that they are both moving together, which is exactly what I want. Now let's do this for the other engine as well. So let's go over here. Let's select this portion of the engine. Again, let's open up that group. Alright, and try to find a point in time where that engine is pretty well straight. So that should work. Again, with my link enabled, let's select this helper, click and drag onto this little portion of the engine. Alright, excellent. So that should be all that we need to do as far as that's concerned. So if we were to just pull back and take a look at this, you can now see both ends of the lightning bolt are linked to their respective engines. So one of the things that we need to do now is actually get this curve set up for rendering, because at the moment, if we were to come in and try to render this, again, just pressing Shift Q on my keyboard, let's make sure I do have this set to render out in a view and re-render. You can see that we don't wind up with any kind of curve here. So let's select this curve. Let's go into the modifiers, and let's actually select the curve itself. With that selected, let's go into the rendering tab, and let's tell this to enable in the viewport. And we can also go ahead and tell this to enable in the render as well. Now, one thing that you want to be very, very careful of at this point is that you do not deselect your selected segments, because again, these selections are feeding up into the noise modifier. If you were to accidentally at this point come in and deselect everything, you'll probably notice now that your noise modifier no longer works, because now I've deselected all the segments that were feeding up into that. So again, just be very, very careful about not accidentally deselecting anything. So let me come back and just undo that. There we are. So now again, let's enable in viewport, enable in renderer, and without losing my selection, let's go back up now in the modifiers, and you can see that we should now be able to see this lightning bolt in the viewport. And also, whenever I render this out, again, pressing Shift Q on my keyboard, you can see that now this curve will render out. So now let's get the material set up for this. So let's go ahead and press the M key on my keyboard. Alright, and for this I should be able to just use a standard material, so I'll just click and drag out into one of these open areas. Double click on that. Let's take the ambient and diffuse and set both of these to black, and we'll turn on the self-illumination color. So let's give this sort of a nice bright blue color. There we are. Let's just move this down and out of the way, so that way we can click and drag this onto the curve itself. There we are. Now, when it comes to actually rendering this out, we'll probably want this curve to have a little bit of glow on it. So that way we can actually start to get some effects that are similar to some of these glowing areas that Justin had set up in some of our earlier lessons. So just to refresh our memory on how that was set up, let's go into the rendering menu and take a look in Effects. So over in the Effects tab, we have the Lens Effects, and Justin was using a glow effect to actually control the glow of these different parts of the engine. So with that selected, let's take a look at the glow options. And you can see that he has this set up to glow on any materials that have a material ID of 7. So quick and easy way of making sure we have some glowing effects on this lightning bolt is to take its material, right-click, go to the Material ID channel, and we'll set this to 7. Now let's go ahead and re-render. Alright, and there we go. Now we have some glowing that's happening on this lightning bolt. So at this point now, pretty much all that is left to do would be to take our Podracer control, and let's go back to the Motion tab. Let's take our Path Constraint Weight, bring that back up to 100%. And now what we should see whenever we start to scrub through our timeline is we should see this lightning bolt that connects our two engines together, and it should be moving along exactly as it should with these two different engines. Alright, so over these last few lessons we've had a chance to see how we can start to take a few different concepts from some of our earlier portions of our training, so starting to get into some line and curve creation, a little bit of modeling, and a little bit of rigging and animation setup in order to get this lightning bolt to kind of finish out our pod. So that will now bring us to the close of this dynamics portion of our training. So from this point, what we'll start to do now is move into some of the lighting and rendering features of 3ds Max and take a look at how we can start to create some beautiful, beautiful artwork using some of the very powerful rendering features that Max has to offer.